whenever he gets in.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order at 6:04. We have a quorum. Any changes to the meeting agenda, order, or content? Hearing none, we'll proceed with the meeting agenda as published. Our first action item is agenda item 4, the review and approval of meeting minutes from 11/12/2015. I think everybody's seen those minutes in draft form. Were those the minutes that you were concerned about? Were they changed?
I haven't seen them come out changed.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion for waiving the reading of the minutes and approving them. Made and second. Comments?
Mr. Chairman, I had sent an email. Sorry? Mr. Chairman, I had sent an email to both you and Andy Grasifa on Wednesday, January 27th, regarding the minutes. It says that I'd like to have, that there were some things that were left out. Should I read them or submit them? Okay. It says, Andy, during the meeting, I had raised a question and point regarding why the town was, quote, just finding out about this, unquote, and commented that when grants are issued, it is typical for the recipient to understand the requirements of the grant. I had also commented on the additional raise of the parking lot and how the catch basins would not hold runoff, nor would they help any time the neighborhood floods, which would be worse with the higher grade of the lot. These are items I would like to see properly reflected in the minutes. Thank you.
So, Mr. Bass requests the minutes be amended with that paragraph. You can take that and work it right into the minutes?
I can.
Okay. Are there any other questions or changes regarding the minutes of November 12th?
Was that, I have a question. Were the additions for the November 12th meeting or the January meeting?
I believe he had the wrong date.
I think he has the wrong date.
This is for the January meeting.
This is our last meeting.
Yes,
Yeah,
you said November.
the minutes, yeah, we're a little out of sync. The motion was made and seconded for 11/12/15. You're referring to 1/14/2015?
Whatever the date of it.
Yeah, I think that was it.
Right.
So we'll just hold that in abeyance for the moment unless anybody has an objection.
Okay.
We still have a motion made and seconded to approve the November minutes, November 12th. Hearing any objections? Hearing none, all in favor? Against? Thank you.
I think I'll abstain. I think I wasn't there.
Okay, one abstention, Mr. Plotkin. And then, back on track, we'll consider January 14th, which I believe was our special meeting. And, yeah, and that's the one, I entertain a motion and a second to waive reading and accept.
I'll second.
Made and seconded. And so there's a question you have, and that is, you've already read it, and that statement belongs in. Okay. Does anybody have any objection to Mr. Bass's addition? It's his comments and wants them recorded and entered in the minutes. I have no problem with that. All right, anything else? No other comments, additions, changes? All those in favor of accepting the minutes? Any objections? Have an abstention?
I abstain.
Abstention not present? Okay, just a little background on the next agenda item, and the committee is aware that between the last meeting and this meeting, the town finance department and purchasing went through an analysis of the budget, primarily the soft costs, to try to get reconciliation regarding bills that were paid or not paid, or invoices and so forth. And then the Shawmut was engaged, and then Colliers Chuck was engaged in the process. and things got a little confusing over the soft cost, what was in, what was out, and I think a reconciliation took place this week, and we're looking forward to a presentation. I asked both Shawmut, I asked you both to decide who was going to present the budget, so I think you are?
Yes, sir, yeah.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead with that then, because that's our agenda?
Absolutely, we're ready.
So this would be the, a presentation of the budget going forward for this project, after it's been reconciled and vetted out by everybody.
Projector.
Projector's right above it.
There's
The wireless device?
yeah, it might be,
Didn't I put it on the table?
see it.
Oh,
It's a white one, I know that. Fantastic.
gentlemen, you might want to
Spread
put
out?
it in the front or so you can actually see it.
Don't worry about it.
Call me a bitch.
It's a good day, right?
Yeah, right.
Watch the power cord behind you, Jane.
No, I'm
No, I'll trip over.
right. Sorry. Trying to knock you off.
That'd be one way.
Right up.
So the goal here is to have the committee review and understand the project budget. After all we've been through, we just want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Everything is coordinated between the committee and the town, finance department, and purchasing.
One second.
And while you're getting it aligned, we also had a conversation around this budget between meetings about making sure that our project oversight function was totally coordinated with the GMP and the construction manager, so that we were looking at one budget. They collaborated on it, whatever they want to do. We didn't want to have any back and forth at our meetings about what was supposed to be in the budget, who was supposed to put it in the budget. So this is a combined effort. Right? Everybody's bought off on it.
Okay, I think we're ready to go here, Jim. What you're seeing up here, I believe everybody has a handout of this in front of them, Jim. There's only one small change, I'll point that out, in one of the line
That
items
is,
that we, in the architect's fees, but it's a relatively minor
No,
change.
it's just scheduled.
Should look like this. I don't know if anybody.
I don't have that.
I had it on my desk, I'm not sure if maybe not.
Don't steal my copy.
No, we don't have that.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we can distribute it later. I apologize for that.
So it's the same, you're going to see this, everybody's going to see the same thing on the screen that says?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Through this spreadsheet, I'm not sure if that was. Okay.
What's this? It has been worked out. Do we have more copies?
I have this one here, I'm not sure if copies were. Okay, I have a few. Okay, so we just have a few, I don't know. No problem, make sure, yeah. Okay, so thank you again for bringing us on board. We're happy to be on board. Just a little background, one of the first efforts we undertake as an OPM when we come on to any project, especially later in a game like this, is we like to do an estimate reconciliation. Part of our role typically is to assist our clients with managing their budget. So the first thing we want to do is confirm the budget, $7,446,999, and the second is what's been paid out of that budget, so we know how much you have left in that. So after the last meeting, we were just obviously getting fresh, so we wanted to get up to speed. So I've worked with purchasing a town on the Riverfield Elementary School project, so we're familiar with them. So I requested just all the invoices that have been paid to date, all the purchase orders that have been issued against this project. So Ms. Dyer and Mr. Ryan had forwarded me their accounting of those budgets, both the Hurricane Sandy budget as well as the Penfield budget, because we understand expenses for this project came from both of those. So what we're talking about today is just from the Penfield budget. So as we went through, we looked at the expenses. Prior to seeing the most recent Shawmut budget, we weren't aware of that. We went through and put together what we thought made sense. We had the GMP amount, that's a fixed cost. We know some of the DeStefano and Chamberlain costs. During the process, we got the latest budget from Shawmut, and going through, we weren't adding up one-to-one on those. We found a few discrepancies there. So ultimately, through all the exercise that Mr. Bradley's been describing, we came up with this spreadsheet to kind of show the comparison so we can explain to the committee what the differences are. Because ultimately what occurred is there's not as much owner contingency as what was expected at the time of that budget back, I believe, in October, November timeframe when it got brought to the Board of Finance. I believe there was expected to be $369,000 in owner, and right now it's about $302 based upon what we're seeing. So I'm going to walk you through. There's 3 pages to this. This form, just to explain this form, this is our standard budget form that Colliers, formerly SBS, is what we use on every single project, no matter if it's a school, a pavilion, all the line items you see here, you see building construction, related construction, they're standard for pretty much every project. We will customize it once in a while to a specific project, but for all intents and purposes, most of the items are common for every construction job. So you'll see 3 columns up here. You'll see the Colliers reconciliation. The middle column's a delta. We're going to show that's where it's going to show the difference between the two, and to the right side's a Shawmut budget. We took Shawmut's budget and we basically brought it in and aligned it with our budget to where they would align. Down the left side, you're going to see you see this 1 building construction, 2 related construction. You're going to see this in another slide right after this one. You'll see how they tie together. We have a bottom line here, total construction, that's your hard costs. That equals Shawmut's GMP proposal. Fixtures and furniture, that aligns with theirs. Then we have all our fees and expenses, our soft costs. And as you go down, you'll see a lot of different, we break out a lot of different line items. They're all included with DeStefano and Chamberlain. You'll see with architect, multiple other, if there was a hazmat, audio visual, there's a coastal review that was performed that was paid out of the account, so we put that in there. That was project specific. Project management, that's Colliers base fees for our staff. Owner's insurance, that's your builder's risk insurance. We have construction utilities use. We already had that. Shawmut had that. Site borings, materials testing. These are very common in many of our budgets. Consultant reimbursables, we track those separately for whether it's mileage, phone usage, whatever have you. We track those separately from base fees to give a more detailed accounting. And then we have building committee secretary. That came out of the reconciliation. We wanted to be specific. There are some advertising costs. Bond origination costs associated with that, then ultimately down to owner's contingency, this 302 here. Ultimately, your total project budget, $7,447,000. These are in thousands of dollars, by the way. We don't bring them all the way out. So that's a brief explanation of all the line items and how we come to a total project budget. This, for us, it never changes. It stays the same until you tell us otherwise. If there's money added or subtracted, it does not change. This is your budget. This is just a tool we use to help you manage it. So going through, if we just scroll back to the top here, again, the GMP value, that's 1-to-1. There's no change there. We're equal there. As we went through our reconciliation process, we lined up the FF&E fixtures for $10,000. We know that got modified. Originally it was $20,000 and got reduced to $10,000, so we aligned those. So there's no problem there. One of probably the larger discrepancies or differences we saw between the two was the fees for DeStefano and Chamberlain. And I think it was just a matter of obtaining factual information in just the invoices from the town to what has been paid to date from the Penfield budget. and putting together the whole entire picture. So what this number accounts for, the 272. To date, DeStefano and Chamberlain have been paid approximately $152,000 in fees based upon their time and materials. And per their contract, they are to be paid allocated 1.5% of the GMP, which amounts to $98,844. We round that to 99. There's a current invoice for $2,500 that I believe you'll be reviewing tonight. And then they've also been authorized at a not to exceed of $12,000 to raise the building, modify the documents to show raising the building at $12,000. So those collectively is what the 272.9 equals. And that's what we forecast the total expenses from this budget to be. Some have been paid out of that, and some are to be paid. But this is what we're gonna need to pay them.
Can I interrupt for a minute?
Certainly.
Just to get us back on track. Can you go to the bottom of your sheet? for a
Yes, sir.
minute? Thank you. I'm just a little bit confused as to the 7447 number
Mm-hmm.
and how that relates to the budget we thought we all approved. That's in the Colliers column.
That's
Did you
correct.
guys redo the budget based on your, I'll say, forensic and what you think the number should be based on this? So how does this relate? I'm not saying there's missing a column.
Mm-hmm.
We had line items in all of our soft costs that we thought we approved as our budget.
Correct.
Are you saying that Colliers changed that but for Shawmut's budget? GMP, excuse me?
No, we didn't change the GMP. GMP is the GMP,
No,
right?
but everything below the line,
The soft cost,
expenses-
the format of the soft cost, the way Shawmut puts their budget together versus the way we put ours are different. We have a standard form that we use, and what we took is their format and just kind of plugged it into ours so we can compare apples to apples here. But the bottom line, the 7447, your budget, the way we understand it, $7,446,999 is the total project budget, the way we understand that.
Is that right? Thank you.
okay. That's
That was-
that's what the Board of Finance and RTM have approved. Is it 7447? I'm
That is-
sorry for asking that question.
No, that's okay. That's the first question we confirm is what's the total project budget we're working for?
Is- oh. No,
That's right. It's the number that's important.
it's the number, I'm sorry, it's the number that's important. So right now, the town has approved 7447 for this project.
That's our
You've taken that
understanding.
and allocated that the way Colliers does outside of the GMP in those, okay.
Yeah.
So that first column of 7447 is the money that's approved for this project,
Correct.
just allocated in different things so we can track it going forward and how you think it's going to be.
That is correct.
Cost tracking, so it's not just, so that number aligns, I just wanted to make sure of that, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the exercise we take because if we don't align with what you've approved, say if it was higher,
No.
obviously, you know where it ends up being, so yeah,
No, I understand, that's what I'm asking, is
Yep.
that the number that the town believes? Okay.
that's our understanding.
Final contingency 302.
No, our final contingency was 369. So it would, you see it over there on the far right.
Yeah, and we're going to explain kind of where that went, and that's the reason we have these two compared, because I think we felt that this would be the best way to kind of show it side by side.
I didn't mean to interrupt, I just wanted.
No, thank you.
So
Please,
just-
anybody has any question, please.
Yeah, I'm going to make the rounds here in a minute. So the 302.8 plus the 270 on the CM side, even though the CM has control for a majority of the project over their contingency, they both are uncommitted funds for this project. So the uncommitted funds or unidentified and uncommitted funds for this project are 572,
That's what I have in my calculator. yep.
572,000.
Is it truly uncommitted or unallocated?
It's uncommitted.
I disagree. Uncommitted would be, a commitment is a purchase order or some other type of agreement that I'm going to pay. I don't mean to quibble with the words. Something that's committed is I'm under contract or purchase order.
It is not contracted, and we're going to show you in the next slide we have, it's uncontracted, it's owner's contingency, that whether you use it for additional fees for DeStefano and Chamberlain or construction, but they're uncommitted, but
Understand, but I'm wondering if all the soft costs are truly committed, or they're just budgets at this point. Like at Loose Furniture, do we have a commitment of $10,000?
that's budget. It's not committed to anything that we're aware of. There's no POs that we're aware of that have been drawn against that 10,000.
Whatever, it's just, there's no line item. Anyway, going around the table, we're at,
One question, I just want to make sure I'm clear. So the 7447 is what the town has approved. It has nothing to do with the additional expense that has been proposed of raising the building an additional foot or the parking lot additional foot.
That is correct. That does
Okay.
not take into account that any additional fees or costs associated with that would come from your contingency of 302.8.
well, not quite. During the interim period between the meetings, the first selectman asked if I would, on behalf of the committee, approve the cost to have the design work done so that we could get a firm estimate for raising the building. And I didn't see a problem with that, and I'm going to ask the committee to confirm that authorization, which is only like 2 days old. So DeStefano and Chamberlain quoted $12,000 not to exceed for engineering costs to raise the building, but to do the drawing so that they could be estimated. The potential change order could be estimated.
And that 12,000, Jim, you're correct. That's been accounted for in this line item 272.9. That's included in that value, the 12,000.
Actually, there are two numbers. One is he spent $2,700 and change, or $2,600 and change, doing the study that was presented to us at the last meeting, the red line drawing and looking at the issues that would be impacted by raising the building, so that we could get at least a rough order of magnitude number for raising the building. So,
I believe that's the current invoice tonight. Is that correct? There's an invoice, I think, that's up for approval
know what
tonight.
it is?
I believe it's
So if you were-
2,409.
just
That's
to-
included in that as well.
Just to be clear, the budget you're looking at includes the design and engineering costs, both preliminary and follow-on, to change the drawings, if we're going to elect to raise the building, to change the drawings to raise the building. So it impacted the foundation, the ramps, and the parking lot. So that's underway. It's supposed to be due in 2 weeks, and then it'll be turned over to Shawmut for estimating. So, sorry for the disruption, but
That's okay.
Just to be clear, sorry for repeating, just want to make sure. So what you're saying then, if I understand you correctly, Mr. Chairman, is that this committee was asked to approve an additional expenditure to DeStefano and Chamberlain of $12,000 to design to enable, in order to provide Shawmut with the information so that they could come back with a cost estimate of what it would cost to raise the building
Right,
an
correct.
additional foot, in the parking lot, an additional foot.
Correct.
Is that correct?
building, foundation, ramps, and parking lot.
What's that? Okay. So, again, so the architectural line item, this is where probably the biggest difference is, again, there was 152 already expended, just in fees, that it was already spent and gone, and then you take on, again, the 99,000, there's approximately 8,000 for their mechanical and electrical, and there's an acoustical consultant associated. They clarified that yesterday, so we added that in. So that 103,000 is where the contingency is getting eaten up. That's one of the, probably the major culprits. As we go down, there was also a coastal review that was performed by Roberge Associates that came, that study is done. There's a PO cut. I believe it was for $9,000, Corinne? But they confirmed that there's no more expenses against that PO, so that's a hard cost, and we don't expect anything else there. But that did come out of the Penfield budget.
Sorry, did you say it was $9,000?
The PO, the original PO was for 9,000, and so we said, well, let's confirm if there's anything else, because if they have an invoice, that's going to go against the project budget, but we confirmed there's no more invoices.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, just to be clear, you're saying that the invoice was $9,000?
No, the purchase order, what was contracted with them was for 9,000 with it was a not to exceed. They only used $3,700 of the 9,000. So the purchase order's been closed, but the expense of $3,700 is going against the project budget.
When we get down to absolutely counting every bean, that
Yes.
was a 50-50 split between ourselves and Public Works, because it was really a Public Works flood exercise. So, right now, let's leave it alone.
Yeah, if that weeds out, we just gain more money, another 1850. So going down the project management, the only difference here, Shawmut had the total value for our contract for $67,500. That's for our staff fees. And then there's $9,000. This is for reimbursable expenses, which we carry in a lower item. We separate those two out for tracking purposes for that. So that's basically a balance there. Owner's insurance, we have a hard quote to the town for the builder's risk of $150,000. And so there's a little bit of a credit there from the original estimate of $20,000. Shawmut carried $170,000. These three items, construction utilities use, site borings, materials testing, those we took Shawmut and we put those into our budget and carried those accordingly. Consultant reimbursables, that's where we carried our $9,000 for our reimbursables, and we are carrying an estimated $2,000 for any DeStefano and Chamberlain reimbursables. Kevin Chamberlain said he didn't expect there to be any, but we felt it would be prudent to carry some value for them in case they do have some reimbursables. And that's what we do. We try to forecast what we think we're going to need, and if we don't, it comes back to your budget. It comes back to the owner. Moving and relocation, this came from the Shawmut budget as well, so we carried that. We're not sure exactly what that scope entails, but we just carried it from that budget. Building committee secretary, this came from Shawmut's, but it seems to be in line with what the town is accounting for. I think they've paid $953 to date, so we think that should be a good number for that fee. There are some advertising costs, probably for some RFPs or RFQs in local newspapers of approximately $2,200. At this point, given we have the GMP, we don't expect there to be any more, but usually once you get to construction, there's not too much after that. And then a bond origination cost of $13,200 that we confirmed that. I think Bob Mayer confirmed that with the town, and that was in Shawmut's as well. So that number reconciled. So as you come down here, you see the subtotal fees and expenses. Our budget is showing that $91,000 higher, and it's again primarily due to the architect's fees that were paid to date is the primary culprit there. So what ends up happening is we basically took your total project budget that's been approved, subtracted out the GMP, all the soft costs, the FF&E, and what the balance is, the $302,800. That's where we come up with our number for that. And you see a delta here of $25,000 between the bottom line. I believe there is $25,000 added after Shawmut established the budget, in I think in October, November. So that's where that delta's coming from.
Okay, questions? All right.
I have to apologize because I'm thoroughly confused. All I see in there is if you add one number, subtract another number, you take another number, you get a $24,000 delta. And I asked a couple of seconds ago, what's my contingencies? I thought I heard it was 369, but I see 302.
No,
Which is the number that we've agreed?
I answered your question the way I understood it, and that was, what was our
Oh,
contingency?
okay, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
apologize.
And our contingency going through this process begrudgingly came down to 369 for the owner's contingency, plus 270 for the construction manager's contingency.
But now, I assume we're down to 302, though.
Correct. That's what this analysis shows after a review from top to bottom, from purchasing, finance department, and Shawmut.
And we have no choice but to accept 302. I mean, that's the
Well-
question on the table is this is the fait accompli that if that's the bottom line and you take all the ins and outs, that the thing that I was concerned about is the contingency keeps going down and down and down.
Yeah, what you're finding here, whether it's right or wrong, is before a shovel goes in the ground, we've asked for, and we've received a budget reconciliation. and you've given everybody a crack at it, so we don't fight these issues every month going forward. So it wouldn't be unusual to all of a sudden have some past charge hit us in May or June. What we're saying, or what the committee said, was this is what we want to, we need this budget reconciled, and that's the problem. So $50,000 worth of, or $60,000 worth of contingency has been absorbed in either late billing, early billing, invoices, confusion, whatever it is. If we want to rebuild the contingency, we're going to have to take something out of the project, some of the hard costs out. If we want to rebuild the owner's contingency and get it back up there. But I think that gets to be almost a moot point if we start to consider raising the building.
Well, that's
And
what I'm
whether the
concerned
committee
about.
will
By the
raise whether the committee will raise the building and reduce the contingency by 2/3.
So at some point in time, we can see that, before we get a shovel in the ground, we can see that contingency evaporating.
Wouldn't evaporate, but it certainly would go down below what you would consider to be appropriate for this project.
And again, I was led to believe that a best practices is a percentage, and I think you indicated what that percentage normally is in a project?
It depends,
Right.
yeah, it depends on the project, but yes, I'm also concerned about the contingency, as we all have been. I think there's other questions to be answered once we understand what the cost of elevation is by the 1 foot. That's really the discussion, I think. I do understand the 66.7, but there's a reconciliation that we asked for. The big question is, what, after the $12,000 of architectural fees, what will Shawmut come up with a price that would be added to the GMP? And what does that do to the contingency? Because it comes right off that 302. It would have to, unless we took scope out of the project.
And the real question is, how low as it goes before this committee feels uncomfortable to start the project?
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate question. I mean, you're going to be facing a situation where you probably don't have a number before you break ground or before you start the project. But you will have the flexibility during the project. If the contingency goes too low, you could take out landscaping. You could take out the riprap in front of the bulkhead. You could not put the riprap cores on each side of the building, $36,000 or whatever the number is. I mean, you could, in order to stay on budget, that's what you could do. The question is, what's the committee's approach going to be when they're asked to raise the building 1 foot, which is totally outside of the original scope of the project? My feeling is that we should put the funding bodies on notice that this is what we're doing. And so that if we have a problem, we're going to have to go back.
Well, you took the arrows at all these meetings when they were critical of this committee as to why we keep going back to them and asking
Right.
for. And again,
Some of them are still stuck, and
I
that's
know,
why my
some-
jacket is...
And the question becomes is, again, ultimately, if it comes out to $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, we may not have enough contingencies, in my opinion, to start the project unless the realization is we're going to go way over budget. And that's the thing. But again, I think what you're saying is we just have to sit and wait to see how much.
Well,
more
it'd
the
be
302
better, it would be better to figure out what this 1 foot increase is, and at the same time, I think we're going to have a better clarification of what the town's trying to deal with grants. Part of it has to do with, it's easy for us to say we're going ahead on the basis of what the funding was to been allocated, which we could do that tonight. We could simply say we're going ahead, we're not going to raise the building 1 foot. We have a budget which is funded for $7,447,000. It has a $300,000 contingency, not great, but if you add it to the contingency that the CM is carrying, it's $570,000, which is about 9% of project cost, about where you'd like to be. We'd like to be a little closer to 10 or 12 because it's an unusual project. On the other hand, there's not too much that can go wrong with it. It's not building a whole school from scratch with air conditioning and electrical and so forth and so on. I mean, there are mechanical, electrical numbers in there, but once the building is back on the foundation, a lot of the risk is going to be out of the project, and we ought to be able to, the construction manager ought to be able to control the costs. So it's a tricky project, but it's a project that has kind of limited scope in a way. It's not a brand-new building. It's kind of a renovation. What would you go in as? I don't know. Steve hasn't said anything. He knows about it as much as I do, and that is, I mean, to me, I would recommend to the owner carry 10%, or 5 and 5.
Well, yeah, and I'll get off the subject. The last thing is, at one of the meetings, we discussed the fact that the use of the contingencies are beyond the control of the committee. That I thought at the meeting, we were told that 1 week after they decided to use some of the contingencies, they would inform us. I believe that's what was discussed.
Whatever we ended up in the contract.
In other words, that you would not spend the money before, you would inform us after you committed it, how much you use of our contingency. I believe that's what
Their
we had to live
contingency.
with.
Yeah, that's the way the contract is stated.
You have to watch the
make-
contract.
Right, no, well, there's two points to answer your question. One is, there's an owner's contingency that's
Right.
not under the control of the construction manager. There's a construction manager's contingency that is under the control, based on the contractual obligations, as far as what they have to present and review, we get to review. The 302, Chuck, right, the 302,000 is our Penfield.
That's
building.
owner's contingency.
Owner's contingency that,
CM contingency is up in the GMP and total construction.
My only issue is if, when you add the two numbers together, the implication is it's under our control, but it is not under our control. I would feel differently if I know the whole amount was under our control, because we could say, we're just not going to do it, we'll have to find some other way. But I'm concerned is we're going to find out about it after some of it's been used. That's my only issue, and I'll get off the subject.
I just have one question, if I may. Sorry, Ian.
It's okay.
And this is previous to my time on the committee, but I see the big, I'll call it delta, is in the architectural fees. And I don't know, my understanding was there was other money outside of this project that was to pay for early on fees up to a point in time. Has that been accounted for, that fees to DeStefano and Chamberlain prior to, whether it's option 7A, were to be paid out of a different funding pot and not this project?
Yes, when we were doing the reconciliation, and we went back and forth quite a bit, there was originally one master spreadsheet that had everything in it. And eventually, through the reconciliation, purchasing and finance separated those out, and they call it account 221, which is the Hurricane Sandy funds, and 224 is this project's. But for DeStefano and Chamberlain, there was $81,000 worth of work that's out of the Hurricane Sandy funds, the early phase 1 studies and schematics that were separated out from that.
So those are not included in the delta that we see
That
here
is
today?
correct. This is purely Penfield Pavilion funds. The way we understand it from, I think, February of 2015 is when those kind of broke and separated, and that's our understanding of, how those were taken care of, but they're not accounted here.
And just for the record, the RTM capped the Sandy funds, so that's where we are.
And there is also in those accounts were some of the early stabilization. I think there's approximately 32,000 worth of work for make safe work that is in the Hurricane Sandy. And then,
So that would be the fence, the glass removal, the
Yes.
protection, building protection alarm system.
correct,
Okay.
correct.
What about the monthly storage cost? We have that trailer there for a couple of years now.
Yeah, that's actually accumulated. I'm not sure the exact price. It's a few $100s a month, and that is actually going to have to probably come out of, I'm not sure if our contingency or, but it has been there longer than what we contracted them, and there will be added cost to it, but it is minor. It is a few $100s a month.
Wasn't it $500 a month, I thought, for that
I thought it
trailer?
was 300, Ian.
All right,
I'm
well,
not sure.
you need to pick
exactly, but I
that,
can
you need to
find
pick that up and make sure it's
Absolutely.
where we're,
So, if I may, I think, I know, at some point, I think we need to go on record throughout the early stages of this project. We all understood that a normal contingency, total, owners as well as construction, for a project of this nature would ideally be somewhere in the 10 to 15% range. And I think we should go on record to the public that as it stands now, we are under 10%.
I think that the discussion regarding the contingency and raising the building, if that's what we're directed to do, that's the time, that's going to be showtime, because the committee will then be starting a project or involved in a project that has insufficient contingency.
Right.
And while we're all sitting here and talking about this, we have a project that has a GMP. We have a project that's gone through public bidding. We have a project that you have interviewed the trade contractors for, whether it be the moving contractor, the pile driving contractor, and so forth. What contingency, given your experience and the complexities of this project, what would be the total contingency? Ordinarily, there would be a design contingency, an owner's contingency, and a construction contingency, right? So the design contingency is a moot point, because we've got design.
Correct, and once once you get up to 100% construction documents, that design contingency typically goes away.
Right. So what about the two remaining contingencies? The one a prudent owner would carry, and the one a prudent construction manager would
On
carry?
the construction end, on a project this size, this complexity, somewhere between 3 and 5%. We're roughly at 3% for a construction contingency. On an owner's contingency, on the projects that I've worked with the town of Fairfield on, they've been between 7 and 10%.
So then the low range of each would be 10%. You said 7, what was your,
7 to 10 on the owner's side,
after the project's bid?
yes.
We concur with that. For this type of project, I would lean towards 10%, just because of the nature of it and the uniqueness of it. Ideally would be, 10%, 8% minimum.
So that exacerbates it.
And that also falls back into what we had a year ago anticipated realistically to be safe of somewhere between 10 and 15%. So those numbers check. They check out.
Right. Okay, you're done with your screen presentation?
Well, this is the budget. I was hoping, Jim, to, moving forward, it's always a question of how are you, if you move forward with this project, how are we going to track the cost? How are we going to manage the cost through construction? I have an example from the Riverfield project of the system that we use that we'd like to implement to help you to track these in detail, that we keep track of these on a every other day basis, essentially. And it's your budget. They're always available to you, but I'd like to maybe walk through that if that's okay with you.
So what you're saying is, that you're answering the question that I was going to ask, and that is,
Okay.
this is great for reconciliation. What is the building committee going to use as a tool?
Going
Which would
forward.
include all the construction costs and so forth. And
Okay,
you-
so leading into that, so all these numbers, if the committee concurs, okay, this budget that we're showing and the reconciliation is what we want to move forward with, what we do is we take those exact line items and we bring them into what we call our budget block. It's our invoicing system, our project controls. And you'll see this, I'm using Riverfield, the numbers will be different, but the format's all the same. So I'm gonna bring that up. So. Okay, so I'm going to try to blow that up a little bit. So, so this is a spreadsheet in Excel that Colliers SBS has developed through the years. We use it for every project. Doesn't matter what project it is. All the items are the same: hard costs, soft costs, architectural fees, bond origination, escalation, everything. So, as you see here. To the left side, you'll notice it'll say building construction, related construction. Same line items will be the same as we just showed you. In column A will be all those budgetary line items that, if you approve them, that's what you'll have in each of those. Associated with each of the line items on the left, building construction all the way down, along the bottom you'll see a spreadsheet. There's a spreadsheet for each one of those that we will log in every invoice. If this is approved, we're going to take all the old invoices, populate the spreadsheet with all of Shawmut's invoices, DeStefano and Chamberlain. Every invoice that's there, we're going to basically recreate this in our system so we're up to date and now. Column A is your budget as we start. Again, this is Riverfield. You can see where it started. B has if there's any approved transfers to the project. For the building construction, that's change orders that come from contingency into that. C is your total approved budget with transfers. Most of them, other than the construction, will remain the same, especially for this one. The D1, D2, and D, this is the difference between budget and what's contracted. What have we cut a purchase order for? The GMP, once that's signed, that's contracted. DeStefano and Chamberlain, once there should be a PO that incorporates their services during construction, that'll be contracted. Our value of 67, our contract will be contracted in column D. as you approve invoices, the paid number will go up, the unpaid will go down, but the balance will remain the same. So we'll be able to see what have we paid to date, and what's left to be paid. And this is, again, active on a daily basis, monthly basis, and we can provide this to you at any time. Over here in the e-com, this project a little bit unique. When we start a budget, we'll have plan but not contracted. We're trying to forecast what might we need for each of these line items. Do we expect additional expenses? And we'll have what we call plan but not contract. That's encumbering that amount. May or may not be used, but we want to make sure we have enough in the budget to complete the project. This project, there won't be much plan but not contract just due to the circumstances. Everything's pretty much already planned. It's a very tight budget, so we don't really see much being in the plan but not contracted. And then over here is your total anticipated cost. So F is equal to column D plus E into F. And then if there's anything remaining, we take the total budget less the anticipated cost, and that's remaining in the balance. So as we go down, again, these are all the line items we kind of went through in the budget. Your FF&E costs will be filled in here. As you can see here, there are some transfers, some other line items. As we went through Riverfield, we transferred monies around in the budget with approval of the building committee to fund certain items. Again, more transfers, approval for hazmat, and so forth. And you can see the numbers. This is a summary of all these spreadsheets here. As we go down, you'll see owner's contingency, and basically this number here that shows. Actually, we've made that 0, plan but not contracted. This project here, the bottom right-hand side, that project right now it's complete, but they only have about $22,000 left over, and Mr. Quinn is painfully aware of that number. He's been aware of that. I would talk with him on a weekly basis, almost more than that, as the project was approaching. But as we go to the bottom, you see all the summaries. Project budget doesn't change. That number stays the same all the time unless you authorize more money to go in or to go out of the project. So that's a summary page of how we track it. Just as an example of the construction for Riverfield, Gilbane is the CM on that project. You can see all their invoices to date. 13, we have the number, we have the date it was approved, the actual value. If there was numbers not approved, it might have been direct expenses that we'll track on another one, but we won't. We'll separate those out. Especially our costs, you'll see our base fee and then reimbursables unpaid might be $100 or whatever it may be. Will be under a separate sheet. We track the contingency that they reduce. Then over here is our contracted value. So this will give us a detailed account of what's been paid and what hasn't been paid. And this is one of the bigger line items, obviously. If we go to our architect, this would be DeStefano and Chamberlain's. From here we tracked, you can see this is the conceptual design, schematic design effort that was contracted for 66.5. As they moved on and added on additional services, we just kept adding those on. But all the invoices, we account for them for that bucket of money for that phase. We account for it there. So when they reach the limit of that PO, we know it. If they try to invoice, we're going to know that because it's going to say over the amount. We're going to show a negative balance. So we always have a detailed accounting of where we stand. As you can see over here in the yellow, 0, it's been paid 100%. If they try to invoice for this, I'm going to kick it back and go, wait a minute, we paid you 100%. It's not been contracted. So we keep very close accounting of that. And again, there's multiple other tabs here, as you can see, various ones. Hazmat, again, it was with, I think this was, actually this one here is, Green Building Consultant, the commissioning consultant, Van Zelm. We track them as well. So for every line item, just kind of going back to our financial status report, it tracks every single line item there in detail. Contingency, this is probably more of the more important one. On this one here, we have quite a few line items through that project, but at the very top, you see that we'll number the items numerically. We provide a brief description of what the change order was, who the vendor is. It's typically the contractor. Sometimes you can see HB Communications. We took out a contingency. It was authorized by the billing committee. We'll put what block it went to, change order, the date it came up. It'll have, if there's any additional days that are estimated, and then a status of approved or rejected. And that tracks, I'll show you at the bottom, we have it so it tracks all the approved, and also if there's pending. If we're out in the field, myself, our construction reps are out there, and we see something that's pending, we'll talk to Shaman, of course, but we're going to earmark money against that issue, because if we think it's out of contract, we want to make sure we're earmarking that. And we throw an estimated guess at it. It's not always perfect, but at least want to account for some of that money, make sure if there's an issue, we're accounting for it. And then we also track, what is the reason for it? Is it a field condition? Did the building official come out and request additional smoke detectors? We'll track that. If there's an error on the drawings, we'll track that as well. So at the very bottom, and I'll show you that, it tracks all these numbers individually. And then we also track when it was approved, what date it was approved, who approved it. It's always going to be the building committee, but there's a finance subcommittee for the for Riverfield. And over here, we just keep tracking over here approved cost. Owner's contingency started at $712,500, and as we approved them, it just keeps tracking as we go down, and we know what that balance is. This, again, links to the front summary page. And then as we come down to the bottom here, the red ones are rejected. Yellow ones are highlighting for meeting minutes, or building committee meetings. So down here, this is kind of where the summary's at. It gives a total contingency budget, the approved expenditures, anything that's pending, whether it's a change order, whether it's one of our issues out there. And over to the left, you can see we have the conditions of what constitute all these change orders. We had 42% field conditions, 34% were owner requests, 11 was the fire marshal, and 14% for errors and omissions, which was less than 1%. It was very good. So again, just for contingency, it's very detailed. We can pretty much break out anything you ask for and what the status is.
What was the contingency
For this project, it was $712,000. It was about 5%, a little less than 5%. 712 divided by.
Is the project complete?
Yeah, we're complete. We just have to do a little bit of final paving and seeding, but it's substantially complete.
Contingency entirely burned through?
22. I'll show you exactly what's left. Right over here, that's their balance, $23,000.
Close.
Very close. We've been we've been concerned about, it's like, that's burned it too close, because your information is only as good as your input, and we've reconciled. The last couple months, we've reconciled with the town to ensure, is there anything been paid that we need to pay for? We're confirming some additional builder's risk if it's there, bond origination fees. We're holding money in that pot. We're holding like additional, if I show you here, this line item right here, bond origination. We've paid $29,000, but we're holding the plan but not contracted $40,000 out of that budget, because we're not sure. We just don't want to release it all. But that might be money for them that'll add to the $22,000.
Would
I had
you
questions
say-
from the committee. Go ahead, questions.
Would you say that the reason you went through the contingency, because this was a renovated project rather than a clean piece of paper? Because we're back to the, my concern is, I've been led to believe from my contractors, and I don't build them, but I'm the bean counter, and they always say on a renovated contract, you never know what it is, and whether you're renovating a hospital or converting a warehouse to a condominium or something like that. And that is my big concern, is we're not building a clean piece of paper.
Right. That's
And
what I
again,
was saying,
think
but
that once we move it out, put it back. So again, if would you say that that was, as a general statement, why most of the contingency was used? Because going into this renovated project, you could not foresee all the things that could go wrong or the additional needs?
You're absolutely correct. I'm just showing our contingency there for field conditions is what we're referring to. 42% of what was approved was due to field conditions, so about 50%, roughly. The drawings on this project, the architect did a great job, frankly, but you're going to run into those in a job like that, a 60s era building. You never know what they did, so it was about 50%.
so was there a CM contingency?
Yes, there was the CM contingency, and we let the CMs, they track theirs more closely than we do. We try to keep a temperature on it. I'm just going to scroll to the right. They started with $385,000. They're going to be releasing back to the building committee around, I'm estimating, and they're fine-tuning that as we speak, around $80,000. They have a shared savings clause on theirs, but it's around $80,000 they're estimating to give back to the project.
Okay. Questions from the committee on this? This is a budget presentation. This is what we're going to be dealing with. You're through with the screen? We'll get back to
Yes, sir.
it.
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I just have one question. We had asked you to work with, I believe we had asked you to work with the town and with FEMA to understand what we would need to track for FEMA. So this is all great.
Yep.
Unless FEMA needs to see something different. So when does that process
That
start?
would probably be the next step. Our first step was just understanding the budget and creating it, but that's the next step. We haven't dug into that, to be honest. I haven't got into that step. But we can tailor this for specific needs for any project. It's our standard, but if FEMA says, we want to track a separate cost, our analyst, I have an analyst who controls this spreadsheet, we can modify it accordingly. We just have to know what it is. I don't know what that is right now, to be
Jane,
honest.
just as a clarification, the town is going to retain the consultant, the FEMA consultant, to track this project.
To track the cost?
Right, right, and to track not to track the cost, they'll track the cost, but to make sure that the allocations are correct and that we're doing it in accordance with the worksheet. In other words, that it's coordinated in real time, not a three-ring circus at the end of the project.
That's great. I was just concerned that,
No,
I mean,
they-
they're
they-
running this in Excel. I
Right.
mean, can they do this when we find out how FEMA has to?
Right.
Yeah, we can modify it. If they have a specific formula, we can do it. I'm confident we can do
Specific
that.
categories.
But you raising the question, my input doesn't answer your question completely. So somewhere between your responsibility and the consultant's responsibility, we're going to have to make sure that we're tied out
Right.
every month.
Yeah, we'll have to collaborate with that consultant, and whatever they need, we're here to support them in that.
And that'll all be done up front before.
Yeah, do we know who the consultant is?
Formatting, yeah.
Okay.
What is their names? Whitney O'Brien.
Yeah, what I would recommend is very soon, a meeting with them, and yourself, Jim, whoever, just to let's get on the same page. What do we need to support their function? And if we can tailor this to help them to do their job easier, we'll be more than happy to do that.
I think to Jane's question, I think the intent is to work with three people, including Shawmut, to make sure the schedule of values. It's more about how I think the building construction as well, that we get the schedule of values right in case the consultant needs it broken out. So
Sufficient
it's a little
detail.
bit different than this in sense, but it's a good question.
If you look at this, they're doing it all in Excel, so they're going to have to,
No.
I mean,
Right.
they're going to have to change it, and they're going to have to know up front. And
Right.
so I get it, but that's going to impact this greatly. So I think it just needs to happen sooner.
Right. So I just had one question, and I don't mean to go backwards. When you reconciled the budget
Yes.
and looking at the soft costs, was there anything that you saw that was not accounted for that should have been accounted for, and why is there not a number on this line item based on your experience in the town or otherwise? Because I think what you presented, and I'm sorry to go backwards, but was taking the budget that Shawmut presented, taking a look at the cost forensically and the purchase orders and said, okay, it doesn't reconcile in total, but is there anything else based on Riverfield or something else that you think we should have had money in for? So is there another line item that will possibly crop up that will also reduce the contingency?
At this point, no, but it's saying you don't know what you don't know also. At this point, we have testing covered. We confirmed scope with DeStefano and Chamberlain they're doing all the special inspections, are going to be inspecting the pile driving. Again, and if you do the 1 foot lift, is there special, requirements associated with that reimbursement there? I honestly don't know that answer, but looking at what we have to date, it appears we have everything for the project.
Okay.
But we've had times where like, oh man, we didn't anticipate
Yes,
it.
and I think that's the answer to the question. Is there something that you said, well, why is there no money against this line? We are obviously going to use money.
Nothing came out and hit us in the face in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Going back to your question, Jane, we need out of this meeting, we need somebody to assume responsibility to make sure that this very important reimbursement tie-out documentation is coordinated with whatever the FEMA worksheet is. So, I don't know, is there, I think Whitney O'Brien has been retained for this, or at least that's what I heard from Bob Mayer.
Yes, they work mainly with DPW. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. So we have a consultant with Whit O'Brien. He works directly with engineering and Joe Michelangelo with DPW. He will at times come to purchasing for purchase orders, invoices, etc., but the actual worksheets are mainly done with engineering. But I can definitely help coordinate you with our consultant.
We just need, between the meetings, now we have 4 people, four entities, you know, between engineering, you possibly
Yes.
going to purchasing and so forth. If we stick with where I think you were coming from, then our project management oversight function is going to coordinate this, relate these relationships so that we don't have a problem downstream with reimbursement. Is that what I'm hearing?
The intent is not that Colliers will be responsible for making sure all the reimbursement is, but if, at the outset, if we're going to have to break up numbers for the FEMA consultant later on, let's figure out what that is now, work with Shawmut to make sure it's broken out before we start, not to make sure, I just want to make clear on the record that this was not Colliers' responsibility to make sure we receive FEMA reimbursement.
No. That's going to be the consultant's responsibility. Right,
Somebody else's.
right. I'm
Yeah,
just
but-
talking about making sure this happens now, not 6 months from now.
Right, because the idea is that while we as a committee are also not responsible to make sure we get the reimbursement, it will come back to us to make sure that we're accounting for it appropriately.
Correct.
So we just want to kind of protect ourselves
Right.
as a committee from that perspective.
Right. Okay, good. Any other questions on this? This issue is not closed, it's just as far as the screen, the presentation.
So Jim, so just so we're going to facilitate a meeting with Shawmut Town, the FEMA consultant, and keep you in the loop as well. So all of us can get together right now and understand what they're going to need, whether it's from Shawmut, from us, the town, to get them proper documentation to facilitate
In an
that
ideal
process.
world-
We're just going to facilitate that.
But in an ideal world, we would need you as a third party to this theater, this play. We need you to come back to us in 2 weeks and to tell us what the consultant's doing, what you're doing, what they're doing, and what purchasing is doing, because we don't know enough tonight to have a discussion.
Okay.
So,
We'll facilitate that.
and talk to Joe Michelangelo and go through the whole drill so that you can come back and sit there in 10 minutes, give us a description of how we interface as a project with FEMA to maximize FEMA funding and meet their requirements.
We can do that.
And it may not come from the spreadsheet, it may be just something simple.
Might be a simple bullet list of responsibilities and who reports to them and
My
provides that.
suspicion is that since we keep on hearing about their worksheet,
Yep,
I have kind of a bad feeling that they look at the project one way and we're going to look at it.
probably right. It's probably total
Right.
different
Okay, if you're
perspective.
through with the screen, we're going to, we'll go back.
Thank you.
Okay, before I leave this agenda item to the committee, any questions so far on what we're talking about?
Can we get a copy of the budget reconciliation?
I'll forward that through Jim directly.
I would send it to the secretary, he can send it to Andy, and he'll circulate it.
All right. We went through something like this before with the engineer and with the construction manager, where we weren't getting enough copies. So whatever you do, you got to bring at least a dozen copies, because, okay.
Yeah, I think that I would like to add to that comment. We have had a chronic problem on this committee of having stuff presented. Excuse me, we need one meeting, please. Thank you. We do have a problem, both on reminding both Shawmut and Colliers that the committee would like to see 24 hours in advance as a minimum, what's being presented. That said, any other questions regarding this particular line item? Or next one is 7, any discussion and comment regarding the town attorney's opinion letter? I think that was circulated. Now, this is the opinion letter that we asked for, that the vice chair asked for regarding, wherever it is, an opinion letter from town attorney Stanton Lesser regarding how the grant, the block grant, was tied back to this project, which caused the problem, the potential problem of having to raise the building. He's provided a opinion letter. I'd be happy to open up any discussion regarding comments. Yes.
The only concern that I had in that letter is the town attorney made reference on several occasions, I believe through his conversation with other Connecticut officials, about the BFE, the base flood elevation, and I don't think there was anything in that letter, please correct me if I'm wrong, that stipulated whether it was the 100-year flood elevate BFE or the 500-year BFE. Nor did it make reference to what the actual elevation of the building was, which I think might help.
I'm just quickly looking through it, and I think you're correct. So the question is to send it back with the two questions, which are the difference between...
Existing elevation and proposed elevation. Or
Yeah.
it should be existing elevation, proposed elevation, and revised proposed elevation.
as compared against which storm
100
criteria?
A 100-year BFE. I think that protects us.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. I thought that in this letter... Okay, we won't take time now on it. Any other discussion regarding the town attorney's letter? For the record, is dated January 28, 2016, was circulated to the committee. We'll follow up on those questions. Item 8 is a continuation from the special meeting, a discussion regarding design, scope, and cost, impact regarding the proposed increase of the building elevation. That was the subject of our special meeting, and we're back again to discuss it. In the interim, as you heard, in a meeting with the first selectman, Joe Michelangelo, myself, Bob Mayer, this issue of the grant, and this letter was presented, Mr. Lesser, Attorney Lesser was there, and he presented the letter, and we had a discussion, a rather robust discussion about increasing the building height 1 foot. At that meeting, there was a suggestion that the committee, as at least a necessary first step, request the project engineer to redesign, not redesign, but to design the or record or draw the impacts of raising the building 1 foot on the document the impacts of raising the building 1 foot. I authorized on behalf of the committee, it was $12,000 not to exceed from DeStefano and Chamberlain. The output of that approval would be the revised drawings, which would go to Shawmut for an estimated change order, right?
Yeah, which we think would, once we receive the documents, we think we could get a turnaround on those numbers within 2 weeks.
So I believe I heard that the turnaround from DeStefano and Chamberlain is pretty quick, like a week from now, or
Yeah, well,
7 to 8
would
days
think-
from now.
Yeah, exactly, maybe by Friday of next week.
So if you look at that and you add your time to it, when can the committee expect an estimate for this potential change? March?
Yeah, it'd be the first week of March. Quicker if we can get it to you quicker, because, once we get the documents, we put it out to the trades for pricing, we get the information back, we're going to want to go through it and vet it, make sure it's correct before we present it.
So the first meeting, our first meeting in March is What's our first Tuesday?
10th of March, second Thursday?
Second Thursday?
March 10th.
Can you, can we dedicate a significant, portion of the March 10th meeting then? Will you be prepared by that time?
Yes.
So the committee will find itself managing a project that had started, right? You're going to take us through the 90-day look-ahead.
Yes.
We'll be managing a project that had started, and we'll get information regarding a potential change order to raise the building on March 10th.
Go ahead, Ellery.
What's the cost, what's Charlotte going to cost to do this extra work? The engineer is charging us $12,000.
Well, that's part of their estimate.
It's just part of, it'll
Just
be
part
part
of-
of the change order, so whatever
Right.
time we put into it, whatever, fees that, were allowed or markup on the change order, it'll be clearly broken down so you can see everything.
Yeah, it's not a separate charge.
Yep.
Their markup on the change, their fee on the change order. It's in the contract, I don't have it in front of me.
All right.
Ian, you had a comment?
No.
If I may,
Yes.
so to go to David's point earlier, the reconciliation shows $300,000, a little bit more than that, in owner's contingency. If in fact the rough numbers, and they were rough, are anywhere near close, I mean, we're down to a point where we're less than, we're around a % contingency going into a project before really, other than mobilization. Do we have a risk of, so I think we're going to need to talk about potential options tonight, that the contingency as it is may be a little bit light as we sit here today. It's just going to be decreased. So whatever, before we start incurring costs to shut down a project, I'm not saying that's what I'm recommending, but why go down a path to find out in March or April that, I just wonder what our options are. Our options are, if they are, to say, no, we're not raising it, what does that do to the town and the town bodies? If we are going to raise it, and does that mean we're committing to go back for additional monies if we expend the minimal contingency that we'll have left? Before we start incurring more costs, I think we need to discuss potential options, because we know the contingency will be going down. This won't, I doubt there will be a savings by raising this building a foot.
Yeah.
I think it's an excellent point. Let's open it up to discussion. If you don't raise the building a foot, then you put the $500,000 grant in jeopardy. They seem to be pretty clear about that.
It's at our responsibility. We have a budget. I think we have a responsibility to work in accordance with what FEMA recommends because of the size of the credit that we hope to get. And I think although we're expected to use this grant, nobody knew what the strings were that were attached to it at the time. So the bodies that voted, the town bodies that voted to take the grant didn't know. We didn't know. Nobody knew. I don't see why we should be accountable to try to fix a problem that we didn't create. I would vote tonight not to raise it a foot because of what Steve expressed. I agree the contingency is only going to go smaller. And let somebody else figure it out.
Discussion on this?
I, for one, do not want to start a project with no contingency. And it would seem to me that if things go wrong, I think we stand easily being criticized the fact that we went into a project that consultants have said anywhere from 5 to 10% contingencies, and we go in with none. I really think at that point in time, we go back, and I'm almost, can't believe I'm going to say this thing, go back and ask for the raising the budget and ask for more money, because again, I think we would be derelict in our duties to start a project without contingencies. Riverfield was a renovation project, and they said that things come out of the woodwork in the best of intentions. And again, I don't believe we should go ahead and start a project. Now, if it turns out it's only $50,000, that's a different situation. But I think we're going to have no contingency left, and I think this is wrong. Every time we come, those contingencies go down and down and down. So my feeling is, I believe we should start indicating to the town that if all our contingency goes, there's a good possibility we're going to go back and ask for additional funding.
Go ahead.
I would have to agree with what my colleagues have said to date. I'm very skeptical of the contingency where it is even right now, given the scope of this project and the complexities that are involved in this project. And I think we've all been together as a committee long enough and through enough meetings over the last several years to say that we actually have some quote-unquote history. And I would be so bold as to project that if we vote it down, that the administration will find another way to come up with the money to fund the incremental expense.
I got a couple of questions. You got one?
I don't have any questions, no. We're sitting at 4% contingency right now in a project where we're all concerned about contingency. It's going south. Excuse me, that number will drop, that percentage will drop. We're left with, I think, not easy, but two options. One is we tell the town we're not going to raise it by a foot. I don't even know if that's the right answer, to be honest with you. It's a source of funds versus a use of funds, or we're going to start saying that we need to go back for money. I will not approve a project going forward at any less contingency. I can't do that. I'm with David on that because I just don't feel comfortable. There's just not enough contingency. Right now, we're at the line.
Poor choice of words here, but when is the drop-dead date for the change? Got to be somewhere around something well in advance of pile driving, or because obviously the pile lengths are...
Ideally, when if we presented a number on March 10th, you'd say yes or no.
Okay, but that may not happen. You can see there's going to be a struggle here. When I was looking at your schedule, we actually were trying to figure out a few things on the schedule. Is that schedule that we have, like, what you're going with, or have you revised the schedule, or?
No, the schedule that was part of the 90-day look-ahead, the overall, no, that's what we're going with.
Okay. So, looking at that schedule, sticking with your master schedule, when do you need, and knowing that change orders take time, they have to be discussed with the owner and approved, and we all know what change orders are all about.
Mm-hmm.
When is your date which you need to contact the contractors that are involved in work, in the scope of work embodied in the change order? When is that date?
Start piles on the 15th.
Of 15th of what?
Of April 15th.
We would need,
This says we're moving the pavilion in April. It's not about driving piles.
I don't see anything about, I don't see a date in terms of actually lifting the pavilion.
Mike.
Sorry. If we're using the same, if we're looking at the same sheet, I don't see any, unless I'm missing it, I don't see a date for the actual lifting of the pavilion.
It starts in April. Move pavilion.
Pavilion.
It says move the pavilion, but what about, so is move, I mean, that's not the same day that,
Leveling and moving from 4/1 to 4/14 would include all the prep work for moving the building.
including lifting.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just make it clear. If the committee finds itself in a position where they're going to approve to proceed and not raise the building because they want to protect the contingency, and it goes back to the town of Fairfield in any form, additional fundings or loss of the grant, to us, we didn't make this problem, we can't solve this problem. I'm asking you, when the first impacted subcontractor needs to know that he has to change his work? When does that first impact, and you're saying April 1st?
Well, for the piles being.
Well, who's the
longer.
first, you know more about the construction of this project than we do. When is the first impacted contractor? When is that date?
Well, technically, I'd have to see the drawings first. If there's any kind of where we're raising grades before we start demo, or after we demo locker ring, I would, have to look at the drawings and tell you.
But to help us out as
Making
far
an
as our
assumption,
meetings
it would be the pile driver that would be affected first.
First.
Yes.
And actually, he's going to be impacted after he drives the piles, because he's going to rough cut them, and you're going to tell him, Make sure you rough cut them at least 15 inches higher than, because we might have a problem here. Okay. So April, so let's back it off, because we got to back it into March sometime. So when would you force this decision? March 15th, the latest?
Yeah, yes, the latest. Preferably on the 10th, but the 15th, the latest.
All right, but if it's not the 10th and it turns out to be 2 weeks after the 10th, can you deal with that situation? We'll talk about it on the 10th, but you have to keep it in mind, because you know the way this has been going. Okay, so we have, Hillary, go ahead.
I just, at the last meeting, somebody said that the rough cost to go up a foot might be $200,000. I don't know who said it, but I know I heard that number. Okay. All right, so I have to assume that that's going to be conservative. It's probably going to be more if we go through this whole exercise. And I think we have to protect the contingency no matter what, because it's so low. But there's also a couple of other factors. I remember Kevin had a sketch, which Ian pointed out exceeded the footprint. So I don't know if Kevin's going to go forward. I don't know how we're going to vote to have him go forward, but I think he ought to be instructed to stay within the footprint. And that might affect the slope even more, I don't know. But I also don't like the fact that the slope is also going up a foot, which will affect flooding in the neighborhood. I think that's wrong. So there's other reasons besides the contingency, which is enough, in my mind, not to go forward with the 1 foot elevation. And again, we didn't create the problem.
Right. Do we meet again before your start date on site?
On a 2-week schedule, yes, we would. I think that would be the 25th.
25th.
The next
Okay.
meeting.
So what we have before us is some dates, some times, and some issues. And that is, I believe there's a developing consensus here, if I can speak for the committee, that the project, if the projects are going to proceed, the existing contingency has to be protected and not spent on raising the building.
Yes, at a minimum.
We're talking about I'm just talking about a consensus at the moment, so keep the discussion focused.
Agreed.
Where you were coming from? Well, I want to just put that in context, and I'd be happy to hear of any action suggested by a committee member. That said, it's going to, we're going to face the real next decision-making benchmark is going to be your receipt of the documents and your estimate of the cost. That still may not change the position of this committee, because even if it's $10,000, we're still protecting our well, $10,000 probably not, but if it's $100,000, we would probably object to it.
And you know it's not going to be $10,000.
I don't like spending the $12,000.
Yes, we're at 4% right now. We just learned today, I just learned today, that our contingency we thought we had is already reduced by $69,000 or $70,000. So we're at roughly 4% contingency. 100 grand, we're just, I mean, it's too much.
All right, given the consensus to develop on the committee, it's hard for me, I can gauge consensus, but I can't gauge the depth unless we have a discussion about it. Is there somebody, does the committee, is there a sense on this committee we feel strongly enough to move forward with the project, protecting the contingency as an action item tonight? Or do we want to just wait till the next meeting?
If I understand your question correctly, I understand that there's, based on what we've been told, there's a requirement for the grant to raise the building. And we can, personally, as a member of this committee, to sit there and say, well, it's not my problem, I didn't create it, I think is not the right answer. I think we have to have all the information, the footprint, the runoff, what it really does, does that foot really impact flooding in the neighborhood, understand what the design changes are, understand what the schedule and cost impact is, and make a decision. My concern is we're up against the start date, which means if in fact this project goes dormant, we're incurring costs. We're going to incur costs. I appreciate the impact of the construction schedule, but how many, I'm sure there's subcontractors already signed up and starting to do submittals. There's people we're going to owe money to. It's just the timing is not very good right now. And I'm concerned when we hear on March 10th what the number is, and then if we have to go back to the town bodies for money, because I will not vote for a project to go forward without the contingency at least that we have, that we keep losing every meeting, I can't vote to go forward unless the town bodies approve scope reduction, whatever it may be. So I'm just really concerned that we're right up against this pinch point, and the schedule's going to drive decisions that I think we should.
Is it the position of this committee that this project will not go forward unless it has the contingency that we've understood, been presented with tonight?
And that number is 302,
Yeah.
not the 369.
Well, what about the 369, yeah?
It's not the 369.
I don't think we need to vote on that,
Contingency
but I
that-
can certainly go forward with that.
If anyone wants to make a motion about not going forward without keeping it.
I have no problem making a motion that we table the discussion, table the motion to move forward until we have adequate information and address all the issues that my learned colleague has just articulated. If you want to articulate them again, well, I'll do them. You don't understand my motion?
I think I do, but I'm just,
I thought that's what you were looking for, was a
No.
motion.
actually, I was looking at the door.
Okay.
No, I'm gonna give you an opportunity, but I can't right at this particular juncture.
I think that the discussion also, sorry, I think the discussion, so my learned colleague, as the phrase is, saying, we don't have time to go back through the boards to ask for money, or we don't start this project. So I think it's twofold. It's we vote to protect our contingency and our timeline, or we say we're going to go back and ignore our timeline and try and ensure that we have the contingency we need, because the two are now tied together. So the motion should be we protect our contingency and the timeline, or we want to keep our contingency and we're ignoring the timeline and going back through the town bodies. So it's, there's time, resources,
I
and
will
money.
agree to the change to my motion, so we follow
Should we-
parliamentary procedure.
Okay, but then I'd like to have you restate it. And if that's where the committee's going, we have plenty of time to discuss this.
Right, no,
so-
I'm just saying, I agree that we should at least know what the number is. It seems sort of, knee-jerk reaction, even though common sense would say we're going to end up voting with this motion in 2 weeks when we find out what the numbers are. But I think that's what we should be thinking about, and the discussion should be around, if we, like you were saying, we need a consensus, that we all understand it's time, resources, and money, and,
Right.
This
This committee's been sitting for 2 years. Plus 2 years.
plus 2 years.
Plus. We probably know more about this project than most people. The real question is, do you want to proceed with it? If you do want to proceed with it, most of the members here tonight have voiced an opinion that they would only proceed with the existing contingency. Even that, they're concerned about it being too low. So if you want to proceed with the project, and you want to keep the contingency, that's where this committee is tonight. I don't know, I don't think we need a motion, but I think that we'd be happy to consider one. There's one on the table, hasn't been seconded yet. But it seems to me that's where we are. We've committed to the town to build this project. We have $7.4 million worth of funding that's been approved by all the bodies. It's bonded, I guess. We passed the bond, somebody voted on a bond resolution. There's no reason why we can't proceed with the project.
Right.
We
I
are
agree.
very concerned about the fact that contingency has dropped by $60,000, 62, whatever the number is, excuse me. And we'll have to talk about how we're going to find that money. I have a couple of ideas, but I don't want to bring them up tonight, given all the sensitivity of this issue. So, are you comfortable if we leave it at consensus? I'd be happy to entertain your motion.
I was only addressing your admission
Suggestion,
to a contingent. I have no problem withdrawing my motion.
But we have a consensus up and down the table. Is anybody, I mean, I know you feel strongly about it that way, so.
I agree. I think that's what we should do.
I think it's called a sense of the body is what we need tonight.
Yeah, I could, but somebody mentioned how long we've been together and what a team we are, so.
Right. I mean, this building has been sitting there, and the longer we wait, the
Right.
more that contingency we're going to
Okay.
need, so.
I will bring back to the, I don't know to who, first person that listens, the fact that we're proceeding with the project and protecting the contingency. All right? Is there anything else on this particular agenda item? Exercising our exercising prerogative as a chair, and also in keeping with the traditions that we've had about public comment, I'm going to break into the meeting to allow you to comment, because while we're on this agenda, please go ahead. We're so happy to have somebody from the public. What's the word?
Well, my name is Drew Georgiadis, and I'm an RTM member from District 9 and live 2 blocks from Penfield. My question is about the grant. I would like to know who wrote it and when we received it, because my familiarity with grants is they're very specific to qualify for them, and their use is usually very much identified. And it's very concerning to me that the grant and the restrictions that are always associated with grants were not fully understood and then not fully explained to the RTM and the other town bodies.
Thank you. You're preaching to the choir. We're with you 100% on it. I think the grant was...
DPW, who wrote the...
Yeah, DPW, I think, wrote the grant.
We addressed your concern, the very same concern that you've brought to our attention tonight. We addressed at our last meeting, so it's a matter of record that we've questioned why, after all this time, as you know, I live there too. We know when a grant is issued, it's incumbent upon the recipient to understand what the provisions of the grant are, and why is it that over a year later, the town is finally saying, "Oh, gee, we just realized," which is your point.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't know, I think that our only contacts regarding this grant have been Joe Michelangelo and the town attorney. That it was brought forward to us, this issue was brought forward to us by DPW, and we immediately responded by saying, give us the specifics, and so we got an opinion letter from the town attorney about how it's tied to, the block grant is tied to raising the building. We weren't involved in writing it or asking for it. We have, just for the record, as a committee, we committed, I don't know how many months ago, a year and a half ago, to just doing our job and leaving the funding and the raising of the money and the allocations and the funding, budgeting, and grants to everybody else.
I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just curious as to, I'm a new member on the RTM, and so only attended my first meeting early December. So I'm just wondering of the history, because this is a $500,000 error.
Or problem, right.
Or a $300,000 or whatever it's going to
Risk.
cost
For us, it's a
to raise
300.
raise the building an additional foot.
Right.
I mean, as a person who lives in District 9, there's a lot of discussion about varying heights,
Right.
And they're not consistent. It depends where you live. So it's common knowledge. So I'm just curious why that knowledge
Didn't get to us.
right.
And it makes it worse because we didn't waste, we expended probably a year and a half talking to everybody that we could find. We dragged conservation, coastal engineering, 9 different meetings over 9 months, trying to figure out, making sure we covered every base and did every bit of due diligence we could. So we even feel more upset being
Blindsided.
blindsided, yeah.
Thank you.
Right, and thank you for attending tonight. Anyway, I'm going to close this agenda item out without the motion. Is that, if everybody's comfortable with that?
Please.
Are you looking at the clock?
No.
You tired of the discussion? It helps you with your daytime job.
It does.
Okay, so I'm going to leave this agenda item open to be continued. Not tabled, but open. Confirmation, this is item 9, confirmation of additional or recent and future additional design cost to revise. We've talked about this. We know the timeline. The project engineer has been authorized to proceed. The fee is not to exceed $12,000. That does not include the $2,600 or whatever it is tonight for the original study. You all are going to estimate as soon as you can. Can we rely on you to call Kevin every other day and make sure we get it? Thank you. I'd like to make sure if we remind each other that he will produce a set of documents and a narrative, and when he gives it to you, he gives it to the committee? And you? Thank you. The final item is, well, we have two. One is a report from the construction manager regarding the 90-day look-ahead. Do you want to just briefly, did it change from your original document?
The word spreadsheet on the front changed. I just tailored it to have 3-month look ahead, starting with today's date.
Great.
Currently, we are releasing our subcontractors. Contracts are going out. We should be completed with all the contracts going out to our subs next week. I have started working on early release packages. The building movers had their engineers in the building for a couple days surveying everything so that they can start getting their shop drawings going. And I'm currently getting submittals in from various trades. Some aren't a rush right now, but I will be getting those in as soon as possible. And then I'm going to be pushing for the next submittal that I need is the piles from the pile driver. 22916, that should actually say 222. We're going to be starting to mobilize the week before the subs start on 229. We're probably going to have to move that storage container to a different location. We'll start getting ready with logistics, meeting with Jerry from Parks and Rec on fencing locations and stuff like that. So once our subcontractor gets there on the 29th, we'll have all the answers ready for him. So on the 29th, when our subs start mobilizing, we'll be doing everything that's bulleted in between 229 and 41 for setting up for construction. We'll be delivering our trailer. As I said, marking out the fence line. The mechanical contractors will be making safe all MEP disconnects. They'll be salvaging all items that are scheduled to be salvaged. Locker wing will start getting demolished, and the preliminary site work will start in between that frame. Starting in April, all the preparatory work will be going on for moving the pavilion, as we discussed earlier. It'll take them about 2 weeks to get it ready to move. And then from 4/14 to 5/11, we'll be moving the pavilion, starting the piles on the east side. I know someone had mentioned we were starting piles right as around the time we're moving the pavilion, but the pavilion's on the west side. These piles will be starting roughly 80 feet, well, more than that, 80 yards away from where we're moving the building. So there is no conflict with the pile driver and moving building. And then underground utilities will also start as well.
Questions regarding this? Are you, is the pile driving close enough to any adjacent structures that any surveys have to take place, or?
No, because to the east you have an area of conservation land. There's no structure there. To the west, you have the playground. So any structures.
And what would you suggest as far as on a project that's close by a neighborhood? There's often a protocol of information, notice, and so forth for a well-managed project.
Right.
Is there a vehicle available to the committee if we had a one-page summary of what's going on here to get it to the neighbors so that they know the first pound of that pile hammer, which they're going to hear at Town Hall? Maybe they'll hear something first about the contingency, but is there a email?
Typically for projects, typically for projects of this magnitude and then projects even smaller, there's a letter that is distributed usually by either Town Hall or by DPW to area residents to inform them of what will be transpiring over the next several days, weeks, and months. And I would suggest that the town would be well served to follow through with that type of scenario.
But I think the committee ought to do it, but mean, we've learned a lot about other people doing things. What's the vehicle? I mean, is it an email, or does the association, are there a couple neighborhood associations that do that, or?
No, well, yes and no. There are two neighborhood associations, but neither one of the associations takes responsibility for disseminating information, because there are some residents who might not be members of the associations. So it can be done via the town's system, the same type of system that they use to disseminate information for emergency situations. They do similar to what they do before a hurricane evacuation. They have email addresses and they have physical addresses of people in the surrounding area.
The only thing I would say is and I live in the neighborhood, if I got something that says sometime between February 29th and May 1, they're going to knock down a building, that wouldn't help me very much. I think if we're going to tell the neighborhood, we got to get pretty close to the date when we're making it. To move a trailer, I don't think the people in the neighborhood care. When you start knocking down a building, we're going to have to be very clear as to when it is to stay at a neighborhood, kids run around or something like that. So my only thing is, if we're going to send something out, we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by embarrassing ourselves, by telling people something's going to happen on a date and it doesn't happen. So again, disconnecting electrical, moving a trailer doesn't impact the neighborhood, but I think knocking down a building, we got to be very clear. If we're going to do what you suggest of sending it out, we got to say this is going to be on or about whatever date. Expect that there'll be a demolition of a building, and obviously there's going to be.
I think the pile driving is probably the thing. The traffic, trucks, traffic, fence, gates, noise, pile driving, hours of operation. I think that we need to, and I think it should come from the committee, and not from some disjointed person in the system somewhere. There are some good examples of that. Mm-hmm.
That's a good idea.
Anyway, I'll take that under advisement as long as the committee thinks it's a good idea. It's kind of I think neighborhood relations are key to this project.
Will the pile drivers start?
7 o'clock.
Is that town ordinance? I thought 8.
It's 8 o'clock on weekends, 7 o'clock on weekends.
What about, we talked about the construction during the weekends. Will there be pile driving on the weekends?
We do not have pile driving scheduled for any weekends as of right.
Okay.
Is there going to be an issue by starting driving piles at 7 o'clock in the morning?
Well, I mean, we go by town noise ordinance requests. If there's a problem with that, we can certainly reach out to our subcontractor and see if he doesn't mind working. See if he doesn't mind working different hours from 8 to 4:30, or instead of 7 to 3:30.
We have 2 neighborhood representatives here.
You have 3 neighborhood representatives.
Is there a sense there for neighborhood?
If I might, I think something that the contractors should be very well aware of, made aware of, and through you, obviously, is that in that April timeframe is the 1 week of school vacation.
Clam jam?
No. Oh, when's clam? Well, clam jam doesn't affect. No, school vacation, public school.
Okay.
Public school is the week off is March something. It's
April 10th.
April. So whatever that week is, I think there are probably a number of residents, and I don't want to speak for them, but being in the neighborhood, I would assume there are a number of residents who would like to sleep past 7 o'clock, perhaps, during the week.
I can tell you one other thing. There is some construction going on in the neighborhood, and I'm on this beach association, and I'm the focal point. And neighbors have complained to me and asked me to go to the contractor. They believe banging at 7 o'clock in the morning, during the week, is inappropriate.
And also, if I might add, because I am also on one of the neighborhood associations, the physical time that they start work is one thing, but quite often, I know, as in the last Penfield project, the guys are there at 6 in the morning setting up their trucks, and they're banging into things and everything, and 6 o'clock is a different time than 7 o'clock.
So, in the area of pile driving, which is the most invasive as far as noise is concerned and vibration, what is a decent work day for a pile driver?
7 to 3:30.
right, will you,
Also,
Go
those
in
hours,
contact with
work
them?
hours, were what went out with the public bid as well.
right, what went out with, excuse me, I didn't get that.
That work hours would be from 7 to 3:30, and they can't start till 8 o'clock on weekends if there was work on the weekends, and that went out with the public bid.
Pile driving is a particularly annoying noise, depending on the type of hammer they're using, but it's still a hammer. So could you address that issue with the contractor about moving that particular line item or that particular segment of the project from 8 to 4:30?
Sure.
See how that works?
No, it's longer than that. It's about
Yeah.
a month.
Mark, how long does it usually take for the pile driver to, they get on site, they have to prep, usually there's equipment prep and warm up for the vehicle. How long do you think that'll take for the pile driver?
Week, and then there's a test
Oh,
pile.
like each morning when they come on site, they drive
Oh.
on site, they have to, there's a startup, each day.
It could depend on the company that's doing it.
But I'm just thinking a noise ordinance, you're not going to start, that has an
Yeah.
engine to it, you have to,
Yeah.
so
but
if they can't really start that engine.
I don't,
think till
you
7 o'clock.
guys can figure it out. What we're saying here, I believe, on behalf of the neighbors, before it happens, before the call comes in, about 7, and that pile driving hammer being in full operation, we're saying that pile driving hammer would be full operation at 8, not 7. So it may mean 7:30 to the guys. I don't know, it's up to you.
I'll find that out. I completely understand
Yeah.
what Chuck's
And
saying.
Yeah, the
Start-
actual
lag
driving's
time
not going to be
startup-
probably
site
7
and-
o'clock,
It's
so.
going to be directly related to how they left off the previous day. It's going to be directly related to the weather. And that also goes for chainsaws, which are a total component of timber pile driving. We don't want to hear chainsaws before 8 o'clock. So they can do their cutting during the day. They don't have to go, Murphy's Law, they'll get out of the truck while we have them choked back on a start date. They'll solve our problem for us by taking 4 or 5 chainsaws and running them at 7 o'clock. We don't want that either. They're more annoying than the pile driving. We'd get some leaf blowers going too if we wanted to. So it doesn't sound like this is the end of the world?
I have to,
That's really good at 7 in the morning.
The what?
Stone cutting for all the patios.
Oh, yeah, well, we're not going to be cutting stone. But anyway, reasonable or unreasonable? You can work it out?
I'd have to talk to our contractor, and I'll
Right.
certainly do my best.
Okay.
Jim,
Anything else? Yeah.
yeah, is the playground in jeopardy?
No.
Okay,
Very precious equipment, that playground,
that's right.
and I understand.
Okay,
Beyond precious.
we discussed and are paying for fencing, permanent fencing, i.e. driven posts or concrete and driven. We also talked about the height of the fence,
6 feet.
and we also talked about a concrete bedded gate so that we don't have to look at it hanging off, bent off, and a way to sneak through, the double gate. Classically, somebody whacks it, the post gets bent, and somebody locks it up at night, but you could drive a car through because they're cockeyed, overlapping, whatever. We've got that settled between us. We talked about screening. We were going to try to use screening on the street side and the 2 end sides and leave it open to the sound. Where are we?
That is correct. There are difficulties with scrim on fences on the ocean with winds. I do think that the ocean side is probably going to take more of the brunt, but the roadside, we're going to put the scrim up. We're going to cut the circles in it to allow wind through it. There is a significant wind event. We may have to go back, repair it, but
So you're talking full height screening for 3 sides of the site,
correct.
and you're talking about continuous fencing. You cannot get in. You can get in.
No one-
Somebody can dig under it and so forth.
With
but
that playground right next to us, we are going to be surrounded by a permanent fence with driven posts, 360 degrees around the building, and the only entrances to get in will be the gates.
Right.
Can I make one other suggestion? There are 2 associations. I am sure they'd be very happy to sponsor a get-together for having this committee address the people in the community to tell them what's going to happen, what the time frame, exactly what's happened. Now, I know I read in the paper, but, you talk about public relations. You're going to, I think it's worth an hour if people want to come together just to go through this. It's just a suggestion.
All right.
What do you
we'll
think?
take it.
Wait, Ian, you're in the community as much as I am. Do you think it's a waste of time?
I don't think it's a waste of time, but I think unfortunately the opinions are very run varied in the neighborhood about this entire project, and I fear that the chairman would be prodded, poked, and lambasted.
More than normal?
Fair enough. Okay, I accept that.
No, we actually went through a lot of this, and we have appeared before. I have. I think that given the history of the project and our relationships generally positive with the public, certainly I would say more than positive, generally positive with the public. I think a document from the committee first would be the appropriate. I think notice, sensitivity to the neighborhood regarding noise and traffic and security have to be a prime concern of the committee. And then notice about progress of the work is also important.
I'll accept that.
Anybody want to add anything to that list?
They can always come to these meetings, and maybe that's what we say in the letter too. Like, here's our meeting schedule, it's been published. We will always have time for public comment. If there's any issues or concerns, please bring them forward.
I think we should also take advantage of the trade press. There are 2 or 3 local newspapers, the Minuteman, the Citizen, things like that. I think would be also a good vehicle to publish that type of information.
Yes.
I'd like to offer my RTM District 9 page on Facebook. I would be happy to post
Great
your
idea.
document, your
Great
letter
i-
to the
great
citizens,
idea.
and then I can email it to the constituent emails I have and ask them to pass it along, focusing, of course, on the people closest to Fairfield Beach Road and moving back in District 9.
Great idea. Okay. I might as well tell you tonight that, no, I'm going to stick with it.
Where's Bob Mary?
Yeah. I'm an ex-pile driver. Steel, pipe, H-pile, timber, so forth. So when just in fairness to everybody, when I'm concerned, because I've been there, done that. Listen to the neighbors, listen to the adjoining buildings, listen to people in adjoining buildings, seen what happens when a pile driving job is run well and when it's not running well. So just be on notice that this is a concern, and particularly a concern of the chair. So that said, and no, I'm not. No, I gave you a little start there, but
You don't have to go watch it.
yeah.
Yeah, his pension hasn't.
Videotape it every day from my window, Jim?
Yeah. No, you don't have to do that. Anyway, did you take my agenda? You took my agenda. We have one more item on the agenda, and that is anything from Shawmut regarding budget or anything else? Anything on that, from that side of the room?
There are invoices to approve.
And do we have any approval on the outstanding invoice? So we have one, I believe? Yes. Has that gone through our committee? I'm not sure that we have. You can speak to it, and we'd be happy to respond to it.
We had the one invoice from DeStefano and Chamberlain in the amount of $2,490. That was for the preliminary design of raising the building for the additional 1 foot.
I think you've seen the product. It was a marked-up site plan, talking about the ramps, the parking lot, made reference to the additional pile height foundation changes. I'd entertain a motion the invoice be approved for payment. Motion been made
Yes,
by
ma'am.
Mr. Bass.
5393.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
I did.
Steve made the seconding. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion for payment?
Abstain.
You're abstaining?
Yeah.
It's either that or he's going to vote against it, so you already spent it.
Everybody's in favor? Mr. Plonkin's being difficult tonight for some reason. I can't figure it out, but we'll work it out after the meeting, as they say, right? Public comment? Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Any additional public comment? Yeah. Old business? We have no old business. We have a continuation on this agenda, which we know about, which is the discussion on the 1-foot elevation. Anything from your side?
Yeah, Jim, just kind of speaking to the invoices, typically what we would do and would like to offer is, as the invoices come in, we typically collect invoices, whether it's from Shawmut, Stefano, and Chamberlain, any entities billing the project, and we put them together. We put them into our system, and we put a cover page on it for this committee to review so that it's hopefully in an orderly fashion. You'll see them before the meeting
Right.
to review. So if there's any questions, if they're Thursday, I'd like to get them to you like Monday or Tuesday. So if there's any questions, but we would typically review them. We have a stamp we put on that endorses the payment because we're
Right.
going to check it against the contract. Make sure we're within budget, and that's what that signifies. So
We would encourage that.
Well, those sheets have sequential numbers, so we knew with the last one we looked at was number 17, and the next one is 18, so we know that we got to see everyone.
Are you talking the invoices specifically?
No, you said there's going to be a cover sheet or something like that.
Oh, yeah, it would just have the date for your building committee date, and it would have those listed for that, so it would at least
I
have the
would
date
just
on it.
ask that those be sequentially numbered.
We can
So
do that.
in other words, this is the 15th submission sent to the committee for
Certainly.
approval. So we know, again, that, because some of us, I'm sure, we're going to keep track of it, so we'd like to know that we didn't miss one for some reason.
Certainly.
I'd like to segue into that. What is your experience with building committees and financial control? Do you like a subcommittee to work with a subcommittee of the building committee, or do you like to work with the whole committee?
We don't have a preference what we like, but it's very standard to have the finance subcommittee, especially when the big ticket's going to be Shawmut's, and so we can vet them out beforehand. If there's any questions, we can ask Shawmut, go back and forth. It saves time here at this committee. If there's a couple members that review it, you say, yep, we've looked at it, we vetted it out. It kind of streamlines the process for the invoice approval during this meeting, so get the...
I think that's what we'll do.
Okay.
Said I would.
If you newest guy, if you would think that through for us between now and the 10th and come up with a 1 or 2, 3-person committee, will you think, make some recommendations to the chair?
Fair enough.
Thank you. Steve, you got any questions?
I do not.
You waiting for that committee?
I could tell Ian wasn't talking into the microphone when he announced my name. No, I have no questions, no comment.
Okay, but you'll hopefully,
If the committee needs my assistance on the subcommittee, I will gladly do that.
okay. Anything else? Any new business before the committee? Did we ever get Rich on board?
No, and I've sent him multiple emails, like, where are you? So I don't know.
So you don't have that fabulous picture with the white wine and the...
I don't. Sorry.
All right, thank you. There's no public comment. It's last call on that. Thank you very much. The meeting's adjourned. Any reason not to adjourn the meeting? All in favor of adjournment? Thank you. 8:02.
Such a treat.
Really appreciate those to the cleaners I do.
Oh, really?